Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the entire AMA, our secretary team, we welcome Dr. K. Ramesh. Before we start his introduction, we would like to welcome him officially with some token of. If we walk down our memory lane, each one of us will have some special memory visiting the forest, visiting a wildlife sanctuary. But we are not very much aware that what kind of career opportunities are there. So today, Dr. K. Ramesh, who is a veteran in the field, he is presently serving as a Chief Conservator of Forest, Junagadh, from Gujarat Forest Department. He has joined IFS in 2003 from Gujarat cadre, he has done his MSc and PhD in entomology from Indian Agriculture Research Institute, which is IRI, New Delhi. He has completed his Masters in Forestry from IGNFA, Dehradun. We were speaking earlier, that how this entire career option happened to him. We'll also listen it from you, in the beginning. So, like we said, that all of us has a special memory towards the forest, and in India as a growing, as a globe, there is a great need what we have to, conserve it, our sanctuaries, our forest, the tourism part of it, and what kind of career opportunities are there that he will take us through. He also did earlier his administrative posting in various part of the states, which is Tapi, Dang, Sabarkantha, and there are couple of other varieties also what he served at various locations. His hobbies, apart from the visit to be in the nature, he also enjoys music, cycling, and table tennis. So forest and the nature is not only a hobby; it's a profession also. Welcome to AMA, sir, and over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay ji, and thank you, Ashish ji. It was a very chance meeting in Sachivalaya on that fateful day when we were multitasking that led to we being introduced and one thing leading to another, and finally this invitation happening, despite the fact that in September this was scheduled and it got rescheduled due to unavoidable reason. So, good evening to all the audience present here physically as well as online. I thank AMA for this wonderful opportunity, and the topic today, what I'm going to speak, is about the tourism sector in the nature, what we call mostly ecotourism, and career opportunities in the forestry wildlife sector. Rather, I'm going to touch overall the forestry wildlife environment sector. Okay. So, before I begin, do we have the projection over here? Yes. Excuse me. So, before I begin, I bow before nature. Nature is the all supreme thing. Humans are nothing in front of nature. We are just one of the species that nature has created in the course of evolution. Homo sapiens sapiens. Well, you must be wondering why this slide when I'm talking about this. Well, let us first appreciate things we take for granted. We live in a cozy home called planet Earth. Okay, in this case maybe Ahmedabad city in the country called India, Gujarat state. But if you see overall, like we are part of the nature, and the kind of lifestyle that we are living nowadays is something which is not very good. That's why the climate conferences happen, right? Now, this map of United States just reminds what happened in the Christmas Eve, right? Some people call it Winter Storm Elliott, some people called it the bomb storm, when the warm water of the ocean met with the cold Arctic air and led to the US was on its knees during the the Christmas Eve. Like climate change is happening, weather patterns are changing. Well, this is not just a freak incident. If you remember, we were heading for a bumper wheat production way back after Holi. We were having a good cropped area and we were heading for a very good buffer stock, and we were presuming that because of the current Ukrainian crisis, like India is going to supply wheat to the African states, and a lot of things happened. Then happened the heat wave, if you remember, in the late March or early April. So the grain filling was not complete, the grains were shriveled, and the production went, what was presumed couldn't actually happen. Similarly, we have a very late starting of winter right now. ठंडी जैसे होनी चाहिए वैसे अभी तक आई नहीं है, right? So the weather patterns are really changing, and this is the generation which is seeing it happen. So I strongly believe that the present generation has a responsibility towards the coming generation. What we do today will define our tomorrow. So there are many such incidents which keep reminding that we need to do something back. Should we say for nature? Probably not. You see this. Many people say save the planet. Do we really need to save the planet? Planet Earth existed even before life existed. The dinosaurs came, they went, the mammals came, and we are here. Human evolution has happened. Earth is going to remain. Whether it is 5 degrees or 50 degrees, the planet is going to remain. Who is going to be affected is the life forms on the planet. It is we. So basically we need to save humanity. We need to save our own species. And we need to save the ecological balance what is existing today for our survival. So before I started my lecture, I thought that this is one conception or misconception, whatever it is, has to be cleared in our mind, that nature is supreme. We are just one of the species which exists in the greater things, and then it is being a species which is defining how the world is running. So it is our responsibility that we save ourselves and we save our future generation from climate catastrophe. So with this with this foreground, I'd like to speak on two aspects. Nature is something we all love to be with. So when you go to nature, when you experience a tourist visit to nature, basically in a loose term we call it ecotourism. So basically I want, the lecture is divided into two parts. The first part I'm going to deal with is the tourism aspect, the different things surrounding this topic. And the second part of the lecture, which would be like a career in conservation. So I come to the first part. Well, this is the United Nations, sorry for that. Well, this is the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. The United Nations has recognized the decade from 2021 to 2030 as the decade when we can heal our ecosystems, so that the productivity levels and the balance is whatever possible, we try to restore it. So in this context, let's see how tourism is affecting us. Basically tourism can be defined as a social, cultural, economic phenomenon entailing movement of people to countries or places outside what you normally reside. There are a lot of sustainable development goals which tourism fulfills. SDG 3, 5, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15. If you see the tourism scenario in India, like in the financial year 20, it was around 75 billion, and by 2027, it's projected to be 125 billion, little less than doubling of what it is. This is based on a FICCI report, Again, this FICCI report is based upon United Nations World Tourism Organization's uh, survey. Tourism is a great generator of jobs. It was estimated that 31.8 million jobs were created directly or indirectly related to tourism. When I talk of tourism, it is travel and tourism both, because it comes in a package, right? So right from the airlines to taxis to all kind of online bookings, makemytrip.com and etc., to booking of hotels, Airbnb, it's a very vast gamut of things here. Now in the financial year 2028, it's projected that 53 million jobs may be generated, but after the COVID pandemic, you must have experienced that people who don't like to be restricted during lockdowns or due to these restrictions want to go out. And you must have heard about the so-called revenge tourism. People want a break basically with their families, and they don't want to go to enclosed spaces for gaming zones or something like that. The preference is towards open areas where you can breathe fresh air, get some good sunlight. Okay. So adventure tourism, religious tourism, rural tourism, wellness tourism, these are the sunrise sectors. So whatever is the prediction for 2028 may be actually achieved in more quantity as in when the time progresses. Now there are different kinds of tourism. When I just searched on the web, even I was, it was a learning for me also. There are people who go for agri-tourism, रूरल एरियाज में फार्मर के साथ रहो और वो कैसे रहते हैं वो जानो. देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड बर्ड टूरिज्म. पीपल plan their delivery in a particular country, maybe for citizenship or something like that. Culinary tourism, cultural tourism, then there is something called dark tourism. This was like if some genocide or something has happened which is a dark spot in the history, people go there to see why it has happened, and maybe it's a kind of learning for them that in humanity what should not happen in future. There is a niche of tourists in that area also. There is ecotourism, there is extreme tourism like visit to Chernobyl types. There is geotourism, heritage tourism, LGBT tourism, medical tourism. India is one of the hubs right now, particularly two cities, Gurgaon and Chennai. People come for quality medical care. Then there is film tourism. Some place, if it has become very famous due to any particular movie, people would like to go and see that place. Like after Harry Potter series, the Alnwick Castle became very famous. So many such movies, Jordan became famous after Indiana Jones movies were filmed there. So that kind of things also do happen. Nautical tourism, like you must have heard about Maid of the Mist. The huge waterfalls and the ship going in between. Then pop culture tourism, visiting pop icons places. Religious tourism, of course, Girnar Parikrama or Kumbh Mela types. MICE tourism is something which is really picking up nowadays, which is meeting, incentive, conference and exhibition. Corporate meetings are not necessarily restricted to their boardrooms nowadays. Like it can be in a resort or it could be in an open area. So that is one sector which is really coming up. Slum tourism, sports tourism, virtual tourism, war tourism, wellness tourism, wildlife tourism. The list goes on actually. Well, out of this I'd like to focus on ecotourism. Well, it has been defined that ecotourism is a travel, but it is a responsible travel, and where it is to areas which are rich in natural heritage, and as a result of this it should lead to the conservation of the environment where the people are going, and it sustains the well-being of the local people, meaning that there is some kind of an gainful employment generation over there, and also in the process one learns more about nature. When you go there and when you come back, you end up learning more about the place that you have visited, and you try to appreciate the finer points over there. So, ecotourism is a very happening subject. Government of India has a scheme called Swadesh Darshan scheme. In its version 2.0, there are a lot of incentives that the government of India has given for developing tourism in different identified areas. Like the government of India has an apex body. Every state will have an apex body. The state monitoring committee will, identify the areas where the tourism within the country is to be developed, and every site will have a site specific plan, and based on this plan the funding and maybe gap funding and infrastructure development, local connectivity of air or rail network, everything is worked out so that the place comes up in the tourism map. This is just a slide to show you that in India we need to do more research on ecotourism. This slide shows the kind of articles which are published, the kind of research which is happening in the field of ecotourism, and Chinese Academy of Sciences as an institution is doing the maximum research as per one of the surveys which was done. US is a country which is investing more of research in how ecotourism is happening, what can be done. India is yet to figure in this list. This is a sunrise area. I find some young students over here. So if somebody is interested, this is one area where definitely your inputs may help in somewhere in the policy formulations. As I told, the post-COVID there is a surge in tourism, and the preferred places are open spaces with great natural beauty. And because of this, there is a down the chain benefit to a lot of sectors. Now, Gujarat has its own tourism policy. Between 2021 to 2025, Government of Gujarat has declared its tourism policy, where it is in line with whatever the international commitments are there, like promotion of green buildings, electric vehicles, then sustainability certification, and ease of GST filing and those kind of structures. And ever since we have taken over presidency of G20, there is a great opportunity for tourism, particularly ecotourism in the country. The first photo over there shows Honorable Prime Minister taking over the symbolic gavel of the presidency of G20, and hardly within a week or 10 days, the down photo is of head of foreign missions in Andaman Nicobar, gathering there, doing yoga, and then of course discussing the modalities of how we proceed for the next 1 year. So India is very actively taking up the presidency of G20. Already meetings have been held in places like Udaipur, in Mumbai, in Bengaluru, in Kerala, and in many other places it is planned to before the September summit. So a lot of places will be touched, and places of heritage value, places of cultural value, and places of natural value will be definitely important. It's a great opportunity to showcase our country, and it's also a great opportunity to build infrastructure sustainably, and it's a great opportunity for ecotourism in the process. Some of the popular ecotourism sites in Gujarat are, I think all of you must have visited Gir at some point or other. You have Gira Falls in Dang. In monsoon people go to see it, and it's really beautiful, amazing. Close to Baroda there is Jambugoda. Kevadia is now world famous, it's on the world map. Not only for the statue, but for the butterfly park, the Arogya Van, the Sardar Patel Zoo, Vishwa Van, there are a lot of things coming up over there. So you have Kevadi forest site, it is near Mandvi in Surat. Khijadia is nowadays very popular with the tourists because Gujarat is in the migratory flyway, Central Asian migratory flyway of the migratory birds. Same with Nal Sarovar. Mahal in Dangs is a quiet and a beautiful place. When you move from Songat to Ahwa, it's a place which comes somewhere near compartment 53, 54 of Purna Wildlife Sanctuary, and it's a part of the Western Ghats, the only part of Western Ghats in the state. So it is worth visiting. We do have a forest department has a campsite over there. There are eco development committees over there. Padam Dungri is a ecotourism site on the border of Dang and Vyara, and recently it has gone plastic free due to initiative of the local officers over there. Well, Polo Forest is very popular among Ahmedabadis. I was posted as DC of Sabarkantha. I used to see every weekend lot of people coming from Ahmedabad. Pirotan Island is something some of you might have visited. It's a place having a lot of natural beauty. It's in the Marine National Park. And of course, Ranotsav is going on, and you all know the kind of beauty the white sand creates, particularly on a full moon night. So these are some of the popular ecotourism sites in Gujarat. There are some success stories. Kevadia is definitely a good success story, that a place where tourists hardly used to go due to government's willpower, policy formulations and proper implementation, lot of tourism footfalls have happened. And not only that, in the process, the local self-help groups have been gainfully employed, and dragon fruit cultivation, kamalam, what we call, has been promoted over there. Now they are going for processing. And here you can see Honorable Prime Minister, during one of his visits, he is seeing that plates made out of leaf mold. So basically these are areca nut based plates. So this is a good alternative to plastic. We have Thenmala ecotourism in Kerala. Kabini is very famous in Karnataka, particularly it's an elephant territory. And about Sasangir, you all know that it is one of the best known places in Gujarat. What is the way ahead? Tourism sector is bound to increase. As our income levels increase, as the social media marketing increases, definitely this is a sector which is never going to come down. And staying close to nature is something everybody likes to. And what is more important is that it should remain sustainable. आज सपोज 1000 टूरिस्ट गए और 2 साल के बाद वहाँ साइट गंदा हो गया, लोग नहीं जाते हैं, it doesn't make sense. It has to be sustainable in the long run. We need to do scientific studies, as I just said in one of my previous slides. And yes, we need to implement eco labels, because even now ecotourism doesn't have certain standards. Like branding is something which is yet to come in this sector. And when you have eco labels, some of the labels I have mentioned here, there are many more certifying agencies. So once ecotourism sites are certified, then they adhere to certain norms as per the international guidelines. Then there will be better quality and better running of the sites in the long term. There is another side to tourism where we need to exercise caution. Tourism is, as on today, contributing to almost 9.5% of the world's GDP as per one of the reports which is available online. But also the fact is that it approximately contributes to 8% of global greenhouse gas emissions, because tourism is also linked with the travel sector. So that is one fact. Every ecotourism site will have a carrying capacity. Suppose you have an amusement park or a cinema hall, like the number of shows you run, people come and people go. But in case of a ecotourism site, suppose you go into a sanctuary for safari, you can't have unlimited entry. There are certain rules and restrictions here, that in a day there will be 100 permits or 150 permits. Beyond that, it cannot be issued. So there are certain limitations, and we need to adhere to these limitations. So every site will have a carrying capacity. Beyond that, it will lead to slow destruction of the site. So that balance is needed to be determined scientifically and also implemented. What is more important is, yes, civic sense and self-discipline, because you must have noticed that in India, in general, the civic sense among people is less. Maybe it will take a generation, but continuous awareness will make a difference. If you remember, Honorable PM had talked about Swachh Bharat almost 8 odd years back, and definitely we have moved way forward in that area. So similarly, when we take up a mass movement towards inculcating and civic sense in our persons, then in future we'll have a much more self-disciplined crowd, and our sites would be much better off. There is another issue of fake tour operators, fake websites, and online frauds and all those things. That is one area of concern where we need to exercise caution so that ecotourism happens responsibly and safely. Of course, the photographs here show that plastic pollution is a very big problem, because people have a tendency of leaving lot of trash in nature. So the photo on the left is from Girnar Sanctuary post Parikrama, from one of the small section of the circular road. The other photo is that even in the sea we have a lot of plastics floating around. So this is something we need to control, and it is entirely in our hands how we go about it. So this is the slides I had prepared for the ecotourism part of it. I come to the next part, that is career opportunities in forestry and wildlife. This is a sector which has a lot of career opportunities, and we were discussing just before the seminar that this is something we need to sensitize the young generation about. So I'll tell you my own story. Like I did my graduation in agriculture, and then subsequently I went for my master's and PhD in entomology from IRI, as you had introduced. But during that process, I came across the people within my college preparing for the Union Public Service Commission, and it was always this, being with nature, the forestry, wildlife sector, it used to fascinate me. Just like, AMA conducts lectures, I used to go to India International Center, sometimes to India Habitat Center, and these kind of film shows, some talks, some kind of a interaction sessions, they were very insightful, and they were very, useful in triggering, passion for making a career in this field. And then subsequently, I cleared the UPSC, and then since 2003, I am in the service, and that's how I am here. So government sector mein, there are good opportunities in the government sector for in this field. The first one is Indian Forest Service. This is an all India service. Most of you know about the IAS and the IPS, but as per Article 312 of the Constitution, there are 3 all India services: the Indian Administrative Service, the Indian Police Service, and the Indian Forest Service. Because the Forest Service officers work mostly in the forest areas or less connected areas or less populated areas, the knowledge about this service or the kind of work we do is relatively restricted. So I'd like to speak on the life of a forest officer, and then I'll come to other cadres also where there is career in the government sector. Well, colonial India had a rich tradition of forestry. In 1864, the Imperial Forest Department was created. But before that, let me give you the background. Like in the 1857, there was this first war of independence, or the first rebellion, whatever is referred in the history books. Then the British East India Company went into the background, and the Queen came into the foreground. That was a turning point in the history. Then the colonial empire had decided that we need to connect the country. That was the time approximately when in 1854 the first train had run from Pune to Mumbai. Thana to Borivali, sorry, stand corrected. So that that encouraged the British to build more network of railways. And that network of railways needed a lot of engineering, and a lot of the countryside was a forested territory. The hills, the valleys, and it had to cross the rivers. So it was a big challenge. And laying the tracks needed a lot of sal wood and teak wood, because the track would be laid on sleepers, and the sleepers were made of wood. So the British needed officers of integrity who would be able to execute this challenging work in a team. And forest was also a good revenue earner, as it is, because the wood was also harvested, and the money was a part of the income to the government at that time. So the laying of the railway network led to lot of forests being worked. We call it work because there was a kind of coup system. This was the early days. Later, it developed into a coup system of cutting. So during that period, the department was created, and one of the best known foresters was given this job, Sir Dietrich Brandish. He is considered the father of forestry in India. He was basically a German. He was appointed as Inspector General of Forests in 1866. And it was in 1867 that the Imperial Forest Service was created. So the forests were properly worked, and the initial recruits for the Forest Service came from the army. And the discipline of the army was inculcated in the forest department. Okay, so the initial recruits, the emergency recruits and short service commission officers, they were trained in France, Germany and England. And then in 1935, there was another change. There was Government of India Act which came into existence, where the subject of forestry became a state subject. Then the Superior Forest Service was operational, and the Imperial Forest Service temporarily ceased. In 1938, the corridor, the beautiful corridor you see here, the FRA building, the initial Indian Forest College, it was established. This is Asia's largest plinth building. It's in Dehradun. In 1966, post-independence, the Parliament had moved a resolution, and a new All India service was born, and that was known as Indian Forest Service. So if you see that way, the Imperial Forest Service is one of the pre-independence and old colonial service, and we are the youngest service also that way, because in the present form we have been reborn in 1966. Now, a Forest Service officer is basically, the pattern of exam nowadays is that you clear the civil services, then there is an interview, and then there is a 25-kilometer run for the gents and a 14-kilometer run for the ladies. And after that, there is a training in the basic training in IGNFA Dehradun, following which you go to your cadre and you serve the state. The kind of job which a Forest Service officer has to do is multiple. Like, you need to handle the routine administrative matters, the legal issues, also the field issues, the wildlife emergencies. So everything related to the forestry or wildlife sector under the jurisdiction of the administrative unit. I'll just give you some glimpses of the kind of life that we sometimes experience. They are just representative images, just for the youngsters who are present down there. Well, if this is the traffic jam in the cities, like normally we don't have traffic jams because we go into interior areas where there is no traffic. If this is a typical workspace, these are real photographs. Okay, so these are real officers in the one in the Marine National Park and one in the Dang Forest. If this is nightlife, on the right side you have those tents and camping and pitching. These are real pics. Okay. Well, if this is how board meetings happen, we do meet in the field over a campfire and discuss issues and bring solutions. And on the down below, you can see that in the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley, a meeting is going on between the deputy conservator and his range forest officer and staff. You may have any kind of neighbors in the city, but sometimes you come across innocent tribal kids sharing delicious desi mangoes harvested from the forest and sharing it with you. So, there are some charms in this service. You are with nature and you are on duty. आपको अगर सासनगिर घूमने जाना है तो आपको ऑनलाइन टिकट बुक करना है, देन यू हैव टू बुक ए टैक्सी और समथिंग, यू हैव टू वर्क आउट द लॉजिस्टिक्स, कहाँ रहना है, राइट? सो in our jurisdiction, when we go, we are on duty, and actually the government is paying us salary for going on those areas, and we get TADA also. But yes, that duty comes with a lot of responsibility of protecting that area. You have to ensure that there is no alteration of boundary, you have to ensure that there is no illegal cutting, there is no poaching, there is no forest fire, everything is running smooth. So there are a lot of responsibilities of sharing the common property resources. Some of the illustrious officers of the service, I'm just sharing some photos. Here you have late Kirti Chakra, Mr. P. Srinivas. He was an officer of the Special Task Force in Karnataka Forest Department, and he is the only one to have caught the Veerappan alive. You must have heard about Veerappan, the notorious sandalwood smuggler and elephant poacher. Only once he was caught alive, and that was in the hands of Mr. Srinivas. Of course, he did escape from captivity, and then as a revenge, he called him into the interior jungle for negotiation. That it was a trick, it was trapped, and he was hacked to death. It is an unfortunate incident, but Srinivas Saab laid his life in the line of duty. Late Shri Sanjay Singh, he was an officer of Bihar cadre, and in the process of controlling illegal mining in his division, he did the supreme sacrifice. Well, there are officers like Mr. Prabhakaran, the photo on the bottom. He is the first IFS officer to climb Mount Everest. This picture is on the top of the world, literally. And here we have holding the India flag, Deep Contractor. She is an officer of Karnataka cadre. Coincidentally, she is a Gujarati and she belongs to Ahmedabad. Okay, and she had gone to Antarctica, and this is a photo of the Antarctic expedition. And yes, the gentleman in the top center is one who had spoken a few days earlier, Bharatlal Saab. He is Director General of National Center for Good Governance, and he is an officer who has a lot of feathers in his cap to his credit. So this I tried to give a little of glimpse of what kind of profile our service has as an Indian Forest Service. I now speak about the provincial services. Now, the provincial services were established in every state along with the Imperial Forest Service to support the Imperial Forest Service in discharging the duties. So it started that way in 1866. The recruitment in Gujarat is known as GFS, Gujarat Forest Service, is done through Gujarat Public Service Commission. The officers are recruited at class 2 level, gazetted, and the officers are trained at Central Academy for Forest Services. We have academy at Dehradun, and then in Barnihat and in Coimbatore. Later, when the officer gains seniority, he or she is promoted to class 1 in Gujarat Forest Service, and subsequently they get absorbed into the Indian Forest Service based on the merit. The other provincial service we have among the officer is Range Forest Officer. Now, Range Forest Officer or Ranger, as we normally know, is a uniformed service. Ours is a kind of a hybrid service where from the guard to forester to RFO, uniform is a part of discharging the duty. When you are on official duty, you are in uniform. Assistant conservator onwards, it is a civil dress which is there as part of the duty. So, range forest officer is a GFS class 2 gazetted officer. He wears 3 stars in his uniform. The recruitment is done through Gujarat Public Service Commission, and there are 8 odd institutes within the country where they undergo training and they are inducted into the state. RFO can be considered as the backbone of the department because the delivery of public services, the protection and the majority of the duties of the department ultimately come to the range forest officer for the field implementation. The photo here, the beautiful photo you see here is of Vadia Palace in Rajpipla. If you have been to Kevadia, sometime I think it's worth a visit. This is Gujarat Forest Rangers College building, and it is known as Taj Mahal of the East. It's probably a lesser known place among the people over here. Then in the provincial services, you have non-gazetted cadre, the guard and the forester. A forester wears 2 stars on his or her uniform and a guard wears 1 star. They are recruited by the department. They are trained at Forest Training Center Kakrapar and Forest Training Center Dungarda, and they are then deployed in the field. They are our grassroots field formations. A forester normally heads a thana, and under him or her you have 3 to 4 guards. So this is how our field formation works, and this is the government sector. In the government sector, I also have to mention that there are other specialized ranks such as office superintendent, legal superintendent, assistant engineer. So there are other cadres also of the office support which are working for the Gujarat Forest Department. So in this slide, I'd like to also figure on the other career opportunities. There are a lot of people who are doing research on wildlife, research on forestry, research on carbon sequestration, and many other related areas. So research is one area where there is golden opportunity for making a career, not only on the technical aspects of forestry or wildlife, but also on people and forest interface, because human population is increasing. The pressure on the natural resources is increasing day by day. So, the forest fringe communities are normally tribals. So, this tribal forest interface is something which is a matter of research where the outputs can help us in better administrating the forest, at the same time in tribal development. NGO sector. Now, there are a lot of compliances which need to be done, where the department and the NGOs can come together and deliver. There are a lot of NGOs working in specialized areas. For example, in Gujarat, we do have Aga Khan Foundation, we have Wildlife Trust of India, which is doing work on whale shark. We have many other kind of NGOs which work in specific areas. Wildlife Conservation Trust is one of them. Okay. Teaching is one area where obviously the academics, if you are interested, then it can make a good career. One area where a lot of adventure happens and we need people where there is a future is rescuer. Sometimes you must have come across complaints that ghar mein saap ghus gaya, right? Ke vandro avi gyo. Then the first person to reach there would be either a staff or a rescuer. If you are from Baroda and if it is monsoon, you will come across complaint that magar avi gyo. Crocodiles enter into apartment basements, into the parking. And as human population increases, as the pressure on natural resources increases, man-animal conflict is also increasing. And we need foot soldiers for reducing this conflict. So that is one area where Gujarat is doing excellent work, and it is also a good option for the youngsters. Well, guides. If you have been to Kevadia, if you have been to Sasan, you must have definitely had your first point of interaction during the trip with a guide. It is the guide who, tells you about a bird call there, or some kind of sighting of lion, or the pug marks which you find on the road. The language of the forest is something not everybody understands. It is something, you hear something, you see something, and maybe sometimes if you even smell something, like in the flowering season or any particular species is in bloom, it has a different smell. So you experience forestry, nature in all your senses. It is the guide who explains to you about the language of nature. So Sasan has almost 150 plus guides. There are guides in Kevadia who also, interpret the things for you, and they explain the way you understand. Nowadays, there is a category of people known as naturalists. If you go to niche hotels in nearby protected areas, you find people like if you are interested in a nature walk, a naturalist will take you around. Basically, like what guides are there in mass, naturalists are further specialized. So you need to be a good communicator. You need to package technical information into a language which a common person understands, and you need to have a local knowledge. So that makes a good naturalist. Photography is something which has picked up like anything in our current scenario. If you just Google, you will find a lot of people who are willing to teach you photography, willing to sell photographs, right? So it could be photography of nature, it could be wildlife photography, it could be simple artwork. There are a lot of categories, but photography is something which always is fascinating. There are social media influencers. That is also an area where people are nowadays diversifying. There are creative experts, animation creators, cartoonists. Have you heard about Rohan Chakrabarti? Green humor. Lovely cartoons. It not only brings a smile to your face, but also it sends a very powerful message. Be it a COP meeting in Egypt, or be it any issue which is currently in news. Recently, that Muhammad Rafi versus Robin was a beautiful comparison. The kind of creativity that has come out. And there are people who are in social media and putting the message of conservation in different ways, and in the process they are also making a good career out of that. Wildlife journalism is one area where you must have read Sanctuary magazine, Save Us magazine. There are many other magazines also which are giving information about wildlife, about protected areas, and different aspects related to that. So there is a good career opportunity if you are interested in this particular sector of journalism. Then yes, there is freelance documentary production. People do produce films, people do produce small documentaries. Did you hear about Aditi Rawal? She is very popular. She is from Ahmedabad. Recently, she released a production on Blackbuck National Park. She has done many by that way, and it makes very interesting viewing. So it's a good career. Well, there are a lot of compliances because India is a signatory to many international commitments. So being a signatory to international commitments, the national laws are molded in that particular way. So whenever industries come up, there are certain compliances to be taken up. So there is a good scope in consultancy, environmental impact assessment consultants, wildlife mitigation plan consultants. So a road project is coming up, a new greenfield airport is coming up, a new seaport is coming up near a mangrove area. Development is happening because India has to continue in the developing path. There is development to be done. At the same time, there is environment conservation to be done. So there is a middle path. The thing is that when you build a road, you try to build a road with minimum environmental damage. Or when you build a airport, we try to have mitigation plans for that. For that matter, it matters to any industry, whether it is the power sector, whether it is the renewables, or whatever sector it is, there are environmental clearances which are mandatory. And similarly, because if the project is in a wildlife corridor area or it is in the eco-sensitive area surrounding sanctuaries or national parks, then you need to do extra steps. So a part of budget is reserved for those kind of inputs, and what has to be done has to be planned. So there is a good scope for consultancy and implementation in these areas. Then India has already committed that by 2030 we will be halving the carbon that we are using, and by 2070 we are committed to becoming a carbon neutral country. It's a very difficult job, but it is possible, provided we gear up for it. So we have good potential in the renewable sector. We have green building and many other sectors, including afforestation sector. Afforestation is the best bet we can do, because when you plant a tree, basically you are planting something which is going to absorb carbon as it grows. The carbon becomes part of its biomass. So that is something where there is lot of scope. Lot of NGOs are interested in tree plantation drives and creating more and more green spaces. So these are some of the areas where you can make a career in conservation. And yes, this is not limited to this slide only. There are emerging areas. Maybe 2 years down the line, there may be some new fields which will emerge. So that's what I wanted to share with all of you today. And as this is the last presentation of the year 2022, I thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here, and I thank everybody present here and online. Wish you a very happy 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, for the wonderful, insightful, useful presentation and insights. I think the way you started, that nature is supreme, is something which is an eye-opener for us, that we don't need to save the planet, we need to save ourselves in the future, the need of the eco-labels, the entire eco-tourism, that is also very insightful. The career opportunities, I'm sure that after seeing those wonderful pictures, we at least corporate people would like to wish we could have earlier the awareness about such career opportunity, that where we can have a meeting on the mountain cliff. So that was really very good. We thank you for giving us your time and the wonderful knowledge what you have shared with us. Thank you on behalf of the entire AMA. Thank you.